I always assumed betrayal would announce itself like a fire, loud, obvious, devastating. But in real life, sometimes it starts as a quiet laugh across a white tablecloth in a conference room. Sometimes it's so subtle that you almost miss it. I almost did. That morning began like any other. A corporate breakfast, not for me, but for Casey, my wife of 6 years. Her firm had just closed a massive partnership, and this breakfast was a celebratory alignment event, or whatever they called it. One of those thinly disguised power brunches where everyone eats overpriced eggs and pretends it's not a turf war with pastries. I came because she asked me to. Or more accurately, she texted, "You're coming to the breakfast, right?" I already RSVP'd for 2. That was Casey, always 2 steps ahead, and me just catching up, dutifully following her lead. I didn't mind. I was proud of her. I've always been proud of her. We got there early. Casey looked stunning in that navy dress with the subtle shoulder pads, sharp, confident. She always dressed like someone who expected to be quoted. Her hair was pulled back in that effortless style she swore took 5 minutes, though I knew better. She gave me a quick once-over before we entered the room and said, "Good, you look respectable," like I was an accessory that just passed inspection. The room buzzed with polite laughter and clinking glasses. It was one of those hotel conference setups, white linen everywhere, name cards, syrup in glass bottles pretending to be fancy. I recognized a few of her coworkers from previous events. Scott was there. More on him in a minute. We sat near the center of the U-shaped table. Casey introduced me around, mostly to people who gave tight smiles and then turned the conversation back to her. I didn't mind, I'm not a spotlight guy. Never have been. I just sat, smiled, nodded, and let the buzz wash over me. That's always been our rhythm. She shines, I steady. About halfway through the meal, someone brought up balance, how hard it was to juggle life, love, and work when your job never turns off. That's when it happened. Without missing a beat, Casey sipped her mimosa, smiled like she was about to say something cheeky, and said, "Jordan? Oh, he's just background noise in my life." Laughter. Not awkward chuckles. Real laughter. The kind that comes when someone's landed a perfect joke. I froze mid-bite, the warmth in my chest turning cold. I glanced around, some people looked uncomfortable, others just laughed along, already moving on. But not me. I turned to her slowly, expecting something. A wink, a quick squeeze of my hand under the table, anything to tell me it was just a dumb joke. But she didn't look at me. She was already talking to the woman on her right about a new project proposal. I sat there, trying to swallow eggs that suddenly tasted like cardboard. Then I saw it. Scott sitting diagonally across from us, maybe 3 seats away. His hand disappeared briefly beneath the table. And Casey's hand moved ever so slightly toward him. Just a small, smooth motion. Like instinct. No hesitation. He didn't laugh at her joke. He didn't even smile. In fact, he looked anywhere but at me. That's what gave it away. That's what made it real. Something in me started unraveling. I spent the rest of that breakfast pretending. I laughed when people told stories. I complimented the coffee. I even told Scott it was good to see him again when we all stood to leave. He mumbled something and gave me a tight nod, like someone whose body was present but mind was 50 miles away. Casey chatted the whole ride home, how successful the event was, how good the feedback was on her closing statement. She recounted some jokes someone made about avocado toast and a spreadsheet. I nodded and ahed my way through the trip, but I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my head. When we pulled into the driveway, I let the silence stretch. "So," I said, trying to keep my tone light, "background noise, huh?" She blinked. "What?" "At breakfast," I said. "That thing you said about me. Just background noise. That was a bit much, don't you think?" She laughed. Not a guilty laugh, an annoyed one. "Oh my God, Jordan. It was a joke. Didn't feel like one." "Okay, now you're being sensitive," she said, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "You do this thing where you can't just let something go. It was a joke. Everyone laughed. You don't need to make it weird." I stared at her, really stared, and saw it, that flash of irritation she used to reserve for annoying coworkers or bad drivers. Now it was aimed at me. Like I had done something wrong. Like I was the one making a scene. We went inside and that was the end of it. She went straight to her office to debrief with her team, and I sat in the kitchen, staring at the coffee pot, wondering what the hell had just happened. That's when the doubts began to crystallize. Looking back, maybe that moment didn't come out of nowhere. Maybe I'd been choosing not to see the cracks forming for months. It's like when you realize you've been living near a train station, you only notice the noise once someone else points it out. There were signs, subtle at first. Casey had been sleeping in the guest room for a while now. Said she couldn't sleep well next to me, my breathing kept her up, or my tossing, or the way the bed felt uneven. I didn't question it. I figured maybe she was just going through something. Work stress. Hormonal shifts. Whatever. She also started lingering in the driveway when she got home. Sitting in the car, staring at her phone with the engine off. I'd glance out the window and watch her sometimes, a glowing screen lighting up her face, her expression unreadable. It wasn't always like that. There was a time she'd walk in, toss her keys on the counter, and say, "Guess who completely shut down the client with one sentence today?" Now she just floated in and out like a guest in her own life. I remember the lingerie too. Not in a good way. Casey had never cared much for that kind of thing, always said it felt performative, like dressing up for someone else's fantasy. But lately, I'd seen price tags from boutiques I didn't recognize. Lacy stuff I'd never seen her wear. I made a dumb joke one night, something like, "Should I be offended you're buying this stuff and I'm not seeing it?" She just gave me a weird smile and said, "Not everything's about you, Jordan." That shut me up. But none of those signs felt big enough to confront. None of them screamed something's happening. They just whispered. Until that breakfast. Until Scott. Until I saw that small gesture, the kind people don't make unless they've made it 100 times before. That moment haunted me for days. It wasn't just what she said. It was how easily she said it, how little she seemed to care, and how no one else blinked. I started wondering if they all knew something I didn't. If I'd become a character in my own life that other people quietly pitted. The worst part? She didn't even bring it up again. No apology. No clarification. Nothing. It was like it hadn't even happened, like I'd imagined the whole thing. But I hadn't. I knew what I saw. And I was finally starting to see everything else too. And the days after the breakfast, my mind wouldn't shut off. That moment, her calling me background noise, Scott's twitchy body language, the silence that followed, it replayed in my head like a film loop, over and over, each time revealing something new I hadn't caught before. A glance. A subtle smile. The way she didn't flinch when Scott touched her hand under the table. It was starting to feel like I had sat through a movie once and only now was realizing it was a horror film. The strange thing about betrayal is that once you suspect it, your memory becomes *P***nized. Things you overlooked, dismissed, or brushed off with logic now hit different. You start seeing past events like a detective revisiting an old case file. And every innocent detail starts to feel like a clue. It began with the guest room. Casey had started sleeping there sometime in early spring. At first, she blamed it on her insomnia. "Your breathing changes halfway through the night and I can't get back to sleep," she told me, like I was some kind of medical anomaly. It wasn't angry or resentful, she made it sound matter-of-fact, like choosing a different side of the pillow. I accepted it. It felt temporary. Couples go through things. Phases. Life gets busy and stress builds up and sleep is sacred, or so I told myself. What I didn't realize was how long that temporary had become. Months. That was the first red flag, and I folded it neatly and tucked it away. Then came the phone. Casey's always been somewhat glued to her phone, especially since her job ramped up. Constant Slack messages, emails, late-night client calls, it was part of her world, and I respected that. But sometime during the last few months, a shift happened. Her phone became more than just a tool, it became a wall. She stopped leaving it on the counter when she showered. It never stayed face up anymore, and she started taking calls outside on the porch even when the weather was awful. Once, she left it on the table while she went to grab something from upstairs, and it buzzed just once. I glanced out of instinct. Nothing on the lock screen. Just a preview from someone named S. No last name. The message read, "Still thinking about Savannah, can't wait for the next one." My throat dried up instantly. She came back into the room seconds later, and I had to pretend I didn't see it. I felt sick. I didn't ask about it. I don't even know why. Maybe part of me didn't want to hear the lie she'd have prepared. Or worse, the truth she wouldn't admit. Savannah. We hadn't been to Savannah in over 2 years, not since a wedding she got sick halfway through and insisted we leave early from. I remembered the hotel room. I'd packed up our things while she slept, and we left the next morning. If there was a recent Savannah trip, it didn't include me. Then came the gym membership. Casey has always loathed working out. Not in the lazy way, but in the "I've got better things to do with my time" kind of way. So when she casually mentioned that she signed up for a gym 3 neighborhoods over, one not even close to our house or her office, I raised an eyebrow. "What changed?" I asked. "I need the endorphins," she replied, tying her sneakers. "Besides, they have great classes." That was the second red flag I chose not to wave. She started going regularly 3 times a week, sometimes 4. But her gym bag always came back oddly light. One night, I noticed her gym towel was completely dry. When I asked how her workout was, she smiled and said, "Kicked my ass. I'm going to feel it tomorrow." She was lying. I knew it. I just didn't want to say it out loud. Then there was the lingerie. We hadn't been in * made in. I honestly didn't realize how long until I started counting. I think the last time was sometime around Valentine's Day. She said she had a late meeting, came home exhausted, and passed out on the couch. The weeks that followed were more the same, long days, no energy, not feeling connected, she'd say. And I believed her. Or maybe I just accepted it. But then, a month ago, I saw the tags in the bathroom trash. Not from Target or Nordstrom, this was boutique stuff. Lace. Imported. Expensive. Stuff she used to scoff at. She never wore it around me. I brought it up once. Tried to do it in a joking way. Hey, I said one evening while we were watching TV. You planning to model all that new lingerie for me at some point, or is it just wishful thinking? She didn't laugh. Her eyes flicked toward me, flat and annoyed. Seriously? I'm kidding, I said quickly. Kind of. Well, don't, she snapped. It's not funny. That night, she went to bed early in the guest room as usual. From there, my mind became a mess of open tabs. Every conversation, every odd glance, every small inconsistency suddenly had a neon sign over it. She used to hum when she did dishes. That stopped. She used to send me midday texts, lunch was gross, miss you, guess what Brenda just said. Now it was just radio silence. Once, while cleaning up the living room, I found a hotel keycard wedged between the couch cushions. I flipped it over. No branding. Just a magnetic strip and a number. I stared at it for minutes. When I asked Casey if she recognized it, she didn't even look at it. Just said, probably from a conference. Toss it. I didn't toss it. I hid it in my drawer. Then there was her scent. Casey had started wearing a different perfume. She used to wear something light, vanilla, jasmine. I never paid much attention, but it was soft. Now it was heavier. More musky. One day I asked about it and she shrugged, something new. You don't like it? I didn't say that, I replied. I hadn't said anything. But I remembered that it lingered on her even after she claimed to have just come from the gym. And Scott. I started thinking about him more than I wanted to admit. That handshake avoidance. That quick, almost reflexive squeeze under the table. The way he vanished from the conversation when I was near. Once, months ago, I came to pick Casey up from her office after her car battery died. I walked in and saw Scott at her desk, sitting on the corner, laughing. The moment he saw me, he straightened up and backed away, suddenly interested in his phone. Casey introduced us briefly and said, "Oh, Scott helps me with some of the more annoying clients." That was it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized he was always there. Helping. Smiling. Convenient. And I had been an idiot. But it wasn't until I stumbled on the text message again, that same Savannah reference, that the threads began to knot. I remembered something Casey once said offhandedly a month ago, "Don't wait up Friday night. I have a regional dinner and it might run long." I'd assumed it was a corporate thing. But now I wondered, was that when she went? A weekend trip? A getaway? My stomach twisted. I started searching her old laptop, the one she stopped using since switching to her new job-assigned MacBook. Most of her stuff was scrubbed. She was smart about tech. Smarter than me. But I knew enough to check cloud backups. It took some digging and I almost gave up. Then I found the folder. Buried deep in the photos archive, labeled nothing more than Q3 drafts. Dozens of images. Hotel room. Candles. The corner of a bathtub. A mirror. In one photo, Casey was taking a mirror selfie. She was in black lingerie, the same kind I'd never seen. She was smiling, soft, playful. And there, in the mirror's reflection, behind her? Scott. His shirt was unbuttoned. His arm was around her waist. And his eyes, they weren't surprised by the camera. He was looking at her like she belonged to him. I didn't feel rage. Not at first. I felt still. Hollow. Like someone had flipped a switch and turned off all the sound in my life. There's a moment when denial dies. Not quietly. Not politely. It claws and kicks and throws everything it has at you before it collapses in on itself, leaving behind a silence that feels like truth. That moment came for me around 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. I was sitting alone in the office, mine, not hers, lights dimmed, the only sound coming from the soft hum of my laptop fan. My hands hovered over the keyboard, still shaking from what I just found. It was real. It was all real. All the doubts, the patterns, the whispers in my gut I had tried to rationalize away, they weren't paranoia. They were prophecy. I didn't find the photos on her new laptop. That thing was locked up tighter than Fort Knox. But her old one, the silver MacBook she used before the company upgrade, had one small vulnerability. It was still synced to her cloud account. I hadn't even been looking for anything, not directly. Not that night. I think part of me hoped I wouldn't find anything. That maybe I was the one losing it, making things up in my head to fill the growing distance between us. But deep down, I think I knew. The folder was called Q3 Drafts. Harmless. Corporate sounding. Boring. But inside were dozens of photos that didn't belong in any business report. Savannah. The photos weren't labeled by date, but I didn't need metadata to tell me the truth. I knew what I was looking at. Casey half-posed in a hotel mirror, soft lighting bathing her in amber. A wine bottle on the nightstand. Candles. Her expression playful, casual, confident wasn't for me. It hadn't been in a long time. And then there he was. Scott. In the reflection, half-cropped but unmistakable. Shirt open. Arm around her waist. Head tilted toward her neck like he belonged there. He wasn't smiling. But he didn't need to. He looked at her the way someone looks at something that's already theirs. And she looked back like she agreed. There was no more guessing. No more reaching. This was confirmation. Not hearsay. Not suspicion. Evidence. I didn't throw anything. Didn't yell. Didn't cry. I just stared at the screen, breath shallow, heart hollow. It was the stillness that scared me. Like a part of me had gone completely numb to survive the moment. I sat there for another hour, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I did. I just wanted to let the silence have its turn. When I finally stood, it wasn't with rage. It was with clarity. I wasn't going to confront her. That was the old version of me, the one who thought communication fixed things. The one who believed you could work through anything as long as you talked it out. But how do you talk through a photo of your wife in lingerie with another man's hand around her like he's flipping through a magazine? There was nothing left to discuss. I didn't want answers. I didn't want apologies. I didn't want to hear her try and spin it as confusing or emotional or something that just happened. I already knew what it was. I packed that night. I didn't even have to be quiet. Casey was in the guest room, headphones on, probably watching some show she pretended I wouldn't like. It was better that way. I didn't want her face burned into that night. I wanted this to be clean. 2 suitcases. Just the essentials. Clothes. Laptop. Documents. I left the wedding album on the shelf. Left the photos on the fridge. Left the little trinkets we'd bought on vacations that I now saw in a different light. Before I walked out, I left one thing behind, a receipt from the locksmith. She'd never hear the new locks turn. She'd never find my toothbrush. She wouldn't get a goodbye. Just that single slip of paper, folded in half and left on her pillow like a pressed flower from a garden that no longer exists. I walked out at 3:02 a.m., keys in hand, the air thick with humidity and finality. I didn't look back. My buddy Ryan had an empty guest room in a neighborhood 2 towns over. I texted him from the driveway, need a place for a bit. Can't explain yet. You good? He replied within seconds, doors open. Come through. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on Ryan's balcony with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the horizon turn from black to blue to pale gold. The sunrise didn't make me feel anything. It just marked the start of the first day of a life I didn't plan for. By noon, I had already contacted a lawyer. She came recommended by a coworker who used the words clean, efficient, and ice cold in court. That's exactly what I wanted. I filed the papers without drama. No shouting matches. No scenes. I left her a note via email. Casey, I've seen what I needed to see. This isn't an argument. It's a boundary. The paperwork is filed. You'll receive official notice soon. Please respect my decision to move forward without further contact. Jordan. She didn't reply right away. Not that day. Not the next. When she finally did, it was short. Jordan, please talk to me. You don't understand. That was her whole message. She didn't say, I'm sorry. She didn't say, I messed up. She didn't say, Scott. Just that I didn't understand. I didn't respond. I didn't need to understand anything else. I'd already made peace with the fact that the woman I loved and the woman who looked into that hotel mirror weren't the same person. There was a strange relief in that. I changed my number 2 days later. I notified my HR rep that I was relocating departments. Same company, different branch office. She processed it without asking questions, though I could see curiosity flicker across her eyes. By the end of the week, I had rented a furnished apartment in Lexington. Quiet, older building, small balcony with enough room for a chair and a beer. I could breathe there. The silence that used to feel ominous now felt earned. People asked questions, of course. Mutual friends, colleagues. Most of them just said, "Everything okay?" In that polite but concerned way. I just nodded. Yeah. Needed a reset. No one pressed. A few of them probably knew. Maybe even remembered the breakfast. Remembered her calling me background noise, while Scott gave her that glance. Sometimes you don't need to tell your story for people to fill in the blanks. That first weekend alone, I drove out to a park an hour away and walked a trail we used to love. Or at least I thought we loved it. She always said the bugs were annoying, that the sun gave her migraines. Maybe I just loved the idea of her being there beside me. When I reached the overlook, just a clearing with a bench and a view of the river, I sat down and finally allowed myself to feel something. Not anger, grief. Grief for the life I thought I was living. Grief for the man I used to be, the one who thought loyalty meant safety. The one who thought love, once planted, didn't need constant tending. The hardest part wasn't leaving. The hardest part was accepting how long I'd stayed after the exit signs had lit up. There's this lie we tell ourselves when we love someone. If I just hold on longer, if I try harder, they'll meet me halfway. But sometimes they already walked the other direction, and all you're holding is the ghost of a shared plan. And so I sat there, letting go of a version of my life that never really existed. Not the way I thought it did. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a moment of catharsis, no musical montage, no cinematic breakdown. Just the wind rustling the trees. And the simple, quiet knowledge that I was free. I didn't expect to see her. It had been 3 weeks since I left. 23 days to be exact. That's how my brain works now, it counts. Days since I last slept under the same roof as her. Days since I looked her in the eye. Days since I stopped wondering if she would ever explain herself and realized I no longer cared. I'd fallen into a quiet routine in Lexington. Wake up early. Brew a strong cup of coffee. Walk around the block before work. Everything slower. Everything simpler. It felt like I was trying to live the way someone does after surviving something, cautiously, with deliberate gentleness. Like the world might break if I moved too fast. I didn't go out much, but when I did, it was always the same place. Small cafe on the edge of town, tucked behind an art supply store. Not many people knew about it, which honestly was the point. It had creaky floors, local artwork on the walls, and the kind of old booth benches that made your back hurt after 20 minutes. But the coffee was strong, and the people didn't stare. That's where I saw her again. Casey. It was a Saturday morning. Late spring. The cafe had opened the windows to let the breeze in, and there was music playing. Something soft and jazzy, the kind of thing that fades into the background. I was at a corner table, across from someone I never thought I'd reconnect with. Tessa. Tessa and I had known each other years ago, before Casey. Back when I was still figuring out who I was and what I wanted out of life. She was a friend of a friend back then, always just on the edge of my circle. We'd had a moment, once, a spark that fizzled before it really ignited. Timing was wrong. Life was messy. I met Casey not long after, and everything with Tessa quietly drifted into what could have been territory. And yet, there she was now, across from me, laughing at something dumb I'd said about how cafe muffins are just overpriced cake pretending to be breakfast. She laughed easily, fully, no filter, the kind of laugh that hits your chest before your ears. Her eyes crinkled at the edges and she leaned forward on her elbows the way people do when they're genuinely present. That was the moment Casey walked in. I didn't notice her right away. She had come in from the side entrance, the one that leads in from the alley near the bookstore. I only noticed the shift in Tessa's eyes, the way they flicked over my shoulder and stayed there. I turned. Casey stood just inside the threshold, a to-go order slip in her hand, frozen mid-step. Our eyes locked. For a moment it was like the sound in the room dimmed. Not fully gone, just dulled, like we were underwater. Her expression didn't register immediately. It wasn't anger. Or jealousy. It was something quieter. Shock. Recognition. Loss. I could almost see the math running behind her eyes, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with whatever story she had built in her mind about where I'd gone, what I'd become, who I was now. I didn't look away. I didn't smile either. I just sat there, grounded in a moment that felt heavier than it had any right to. And then I turned back to Tessa as casually as if I had only been distracted by the weather. She didn't ask who Casey was. Not right away. She just sipped her drink and changed the subject like she instinctively knew I needed space to decide how much to share. But I could feel Casey's presence behind me like static. A minute later, I heard the door open again. Then close. She left. I waited another 30 seconds before I let myself breathe. That was the thing I hadn't expected, not the run-in, not the eye contact, not even the grief that ghosted her face. What caught me off guard was the peace I felt after it happened. I didn't feel pulled toward her. Didn't feel the urge to explain, or argue, or chase after her. I felt separate. Not in a bitter way. Just done. After we left the cafe, Tessa and I walked through the farmer's market on Main. She bought too many peaches. I teased her about it. She said she had plans to bake something and then admitted she probably wouldn't. We passed a local charity booth set up near the fountain. They were organizing a drive for local kids who'd lost a parent. Without really thinking, I signed up to volunteer. Tessa did the same. It wasn't a moment. It was just a gesture. But something about it felt grounding. I wasn't chasing a new life. I was building one. Later that night, I got a text from a number I hadn't blocked, though maybe I should have. Casey. Didn't expect to see you today. You looked different. I'm happy you're okay. That was all she wrote. No apology. No anger. No desperation. Just that. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I'm sure that moment in the cafe played on repeat in her head for days. Maybe she told herself it didn't mean anything. Maybe she told someone else that she was happy for me. Maybe she cried. I don't know. And more importantly, I didn't need to know. But if she was hoping that seeing me would crack something open, it didn't. If she was hoping I was miserable, that I'd be alone, broken, adrift, she didn't find what she was looking for. She found me sitting across from a woman she never trusted. A woman who had always unnerved her, even though they'd only met once, briefly, at a fundraiser years ago. I remember Casey saying afterward, there's something about her I don't like. When I asked why, she just shrugged. Sometimes you just know, she said. Maybe she did. Maybe Casey always sensed there was something between Tessa and me, some unfinished story. Maybe that's why her expression in the cafe wasn't just surprise. Maybe it was recognition. The kind that cuts deeper than jealousy. The kind that says, you moved on. But not just with someone else. With someone real. The days that followed felt strangely lighter. Tessa and I didn't jump into anything. That wasn't the point. We met for coffee again. Talked about books we'd both pretended to read in college. Walked through local art galleries and laughed at the weird installations that made no sense. It wasn't a relationship. It was just connection. Effortless. Genuine. Free of performance. What hit me most wasn't how new it felt. It was how familiar it felt. Like coming back to a version of myself I hadn't seen in years, the version that joked too much, got excited about dumb things, like to build furniture he never finished. I'd been buried beneath a persona for so long, supportive husband, silent partner, emotional ballast. I didn't realize how much of myself I'd handed over until I finally stopped carrying her weight. Sometimes you don't realize you were invisible in your own story until someone looks at you and actually sees you. That's what Tessa did. She saw me. Not for who I had been with Casey. Not for what I had lost. But for what I still was. And maybe Casey saw that too. That moment in the cafe, it didn't spark a second chance. It didn't create an opening. It closed the book. Because for the first time, she saw the story moving on without her. And she couldn't rewrite the ending. I used to think stories collapsed all at once, like a dam breaking or a glass shattering on tile. Sudden. Loud. Obvious. But the truth is, some stories unravel slowly, like thread being pulled from the hem of a well-tailored lie. Casey's version unraveled like that, not with drama, but with silence. At first, I assumed she'd keep our breakup quiet. She never liked appearing vulnerable, especially not in professional settings. She prided herself on owning the room, as she put it, being the woman who had it all together. But I underestimated her need to control the narrative. It started with whispers. A mutual friend from her firm, someone I'd once shared nachos with at a holiday party, ran into me at the hardware store. He looked surprised to see me in town. We made small talk and then, cautiously, he asked, "So, you and Casey? Everything okay?" I shrugged. "We're separated." He raised his eyebrows, clearly taken off guard. "Huh. Didn't know. She said you left because you couldn't handle her success." That's when I realized she was rewriting it. In her version, I was threatened by her career, jealous of her growing presence in the company, in asterisk mitigated by the fact that she was becoming the face of something bigger than us. According to Casey, I packed up and vanished not because of infidelity or betrayal, but because I couldn't keep up. I didn't even get angry. I just nodded and said, "Interesting," and kept shopping for light bulbs. But it sat with me later. Not because I cared about what she told people, but because I knew it would only work for a while. People weren't dumb. They remembered the breakfast. The background noise comment had stuck with more people than I realized. That same friend, the one from the hardware store, texted me later that night. "Hey man, just wanted to say I remember what she said that morning. A lot of us were shocked. We didn't say anything, but yeah, you didn't deserve that." I stared at the message for a long time. It was strange how validating one sentence from a near stranger could be. Not because I needed approval, but because for the first time someone else acknowledged that I hadn't imagined it. That the public erosion of our relationship had started long before I left. After that, the silence grew. Casey stopped getting invited to things subtly at first. Casual happy hours she wasn't tagged in. Group photos she was noticeably absent from. Her colleagues didn't confront her. They didn't need to. People just started choosing the path of least resistance, and that path no longer included her. She tried to hold on. I heard through the grapevine that she'd volunteered to host a team dinner at her place, the same house I used to call home. Only 2 people showed up and they didn't stay long. She posted a photo of the wine glasses anyway. No faces. Just a caption about a night of powerful conversation with great minds. I didn't comment. Didn't like it. Didn't even open it more than once. But I knew what it was. It was a defense mechanism. A last-ditch effort to paint the picture she wanted others to see. A woman in control. A woman unbothered. A woman who had been wronged by a man too fragile to love her properly. She didn't know that her story was cracking at the edges. Even some of her close friends, the ones who used to fawn over her curated confidence, started backing away. One of them, Morgan, sent me a DM one night. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. "I hope this isn't weird, but I just want to say I'm sorry. I didn't know everything. I still don't. But I saw how she treated you toward the end. Some of us did. We just didn't speak up. You deserve better." That message didn't surprise me. I'd always suspected that Casey's friendships, like so many things in her life, were based on convenience, not connection. She surrounded herself with people who reinforced her narrative. But when that narrative started to rot, the scaffolding fell. She tried to reach out to me again a few weeks after the cafe incident. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a message sent through a mutual contact. Said she wanted just one conversation. That she had things she needed to clear up. I didn't respond. There's nothing to clear up when the truth is already laid bare. Instead, I kept moving forward. Tessa and I had started spending more time together, slowly, intentionally. We weren't rushing anything. It wasn't a rebound. It wasn't performative. It was just 2 people rediscovering the safety of being seen without pretense. We started volunteering at that charity drive we stumbled into. Nothing huge, packing boxes, setting up donation tables, sorting through gently used clothes, and trying not to sneeze from the dust. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt real. One day, while we were folding jeans into bins, Tessa said, "You know, you're different now." "Different how?" "You look people in the eye again." I didn't say anything, but I felt it. She was right. Casey used to call me low maintenance. She meant it as a compliment. But really, it was just a polite way of saying I didn't ask for much. That I didn't expect to be prioritized. Tessa didn't call me that. She asked questions, challenged me, saw past the smile, and I didn't flinch. A few days after that, I heard Casey had been passed over for a promotion she had been chasing all year. She didn't post about it, but I saw it mentioned in an industry blog I used to follow. The article highlighted her colleague, a rising star newly appointed. There was a group photo. Scott wasn't in it. Casey wasn't either. It was a clean slate whether they meant it that way or not. I didn't revel in it. I didn't celebrate her fall. But I didn't feel bad either. Actions have weight. Eventually they land. And when they do, they don't just bruise reputations. They bruise credibility. Casey had tried to spin the story. She made me the villain. Framed herself as the misunderstood heroine. But real life has a way of revealing what curated Instagram captions can't hide. People watched her climb. Then they watched her push someone off the ladder to make more space. And they remembered. That's the thing about narratives. You can control the story for a while. But eventually, people stop reading the version you're selling. They start looking at what you do, not what you post. And in Casey's case, the story she tried to sell no longer aligned with what people saw. So they stopped listening. They stopped inviting. They stopped defending. She thought the collapse would be mine. But it was hers. And it didn't come with fireworks. Came with silence. She showed up unannounced. I knew the knock before I opened the door. Casey stood there, holding nothing, wearing some version of regret. "I just wanted to see you," she said. I didn't invite her in. Behind me, the house was calm. Framed photos of Tessa and my daughter from a previous marriage, books on shelves, clean surfaces. She looked past me, like she was trying to spot the man she once molded. "You look settled," she said. I nodded. "I am." The silence was heavier than the years we spent together. She didn't cry. I think she expected to feel something. Anger, nostalgia, maybe hope. But there was nothing. No fire. No spark. Just distance. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice.